Shamanism, personal quests of communion with nature and creation. The new book of the Sacred Stories Common Sentient series that has been born from the womb and the heart and the brilliance of an expanded mind of these wonderful sisters and brothers, collaborative authors that make storytelling a living, pulsing, vibrant medicine for our world. Shamanism has existed since time immemorial. In my humble opinion, I define shamanism very simply. Shamanism arose or originated with the first human impulse to care for something other than oneself, equally or more than oneself, meaning an empathic, altruistic, selfless engagement with life. And I'm not just talking about two-legged, our human relatives. I am talking about the whole spectrum of species-wide life upon planet and beyond. Communing with that soul-animated, living, sentient cosmos is what shamanism has always served to bring into the earth plane, and to he or she who was chosen by the spirits to serve their community be a mediator, a vessel, an instrument of this larger reality, of this cosmic awareness for their people. And everybody now is awakening to the shamanic path. What was once a popular part of the 50s and 60s through Zen Buddhism that then merged into Tibetan Buddhism and much of the other Eastern traditions has now turned to the Amerindian people. South American, Central American, and North American tribal nations are starting to open up their mystery teachings, their ceremonial arts, their ritual practices, and most important, their love of life, of family, and of community to the world that is non-Indigenous. The time has come that we realize we are all children of our Mother Earth. We are all native to this planet, and hence we have the same rights as anybody has to walk in beauty and do our ceremonies with grace and with respect for all our relatives. So I see that we have a few people here that I jotted down some notes. Allison Kenny is the lucid dreamer, nightmare purveyor whose love of nature opened her life to spirit. And to that, I'd like to go ahead, Allison, and open up the space for you to tell us a little bit about where you're at.
Thank you so much, Oscar. What brought me to tell this particular story was that it was my first shamanic experience when I was 5 years old. So I'm 50 years old now, so I had to retrace all the way back. I chose to retrace back to that very first moment when I was standing on the edge of a ravine with my father. And I had my hand, stretched up to his because I was so small. And all I could remember was that I had a family around me, this eternal, vibing, rich, communicative, character-filled family of nature all around me. The trees were like grandmothers. The river was like my sibling. I'm gonna get choked up, I'm sorry. But anyway, so I had like this whole family of nature, the ground that I was standing on, the air, the wind that was playing with my hair. And this was my family. And I was holding my father's hand, and I heard chanting, low tonal chanting. And I had never heard anything like that. I was born in a Roman Catholic family, middle-class America, so I had no reference for this, but it was very familiar, this chanting. And I followed the sound with my intuition until I saw a canoe of indigenous men floating down the river. And you'll have to read the story. I don't know if I'm giving it away, but I was very cognizant, even at 5 years old, that there was a point at which this boat would cross my path and something that would change my life forever would happen. And it did. One of the men looked into my soul. I looked into his, and there was an exchange. I felt him leap into me. And I just allowed that to happen, and then the boat went on and went away. Thank you.
So you had some extraordinary experiences with the mother, especially with Lori Ann, that her ability to bring together an awareness in your life through your communion with our plant grandmother, Ayahuasquita Linda, set the stage for you no longer to be attached to the, to the hucha, to the lower density that characterize a lot of your family dynamics, right?
Yes.
And so is she still with you, your baby sister in spirit?
I don't feel her as profoundly as I did in that encounter, but I know that all my family who have transitioned are always with me. I mean, that is just a certainty that I feel. And that encounter with her in the plant medicine ceremony was so profound, because I had gone into this ceremony with the intention of bringing some healing to my mother and my current living sister, about some medical issues that they were both encountering, and a remembering of a story that got told to me just a handful of years ago. So 50 years later, after this event had happened, where my mother had birthed a baby who was so severely deformed that she couldn't come home. And so she was sent to a hospital, and she lived to be 2 years old. And I never met her. And most of the family did not go see her except for my mother and my grandmother. And the story never got talked about. We never honored her in any of our celebrations or anything. And so it was a surprise 50 years later to see how much pain my mother still carried about her child. And so my intention going into the ceremony was to bring some healing to my mom, and thinking about what would have gone on for her at that time when I was only 7 years old. And as the journey progressed, it came about to say, well, what actually happened to me as a young girl? What happened when I was waiting for a sibling to come home and she never came to the house? And how did the family handle the grief? I have no memory of that time. And as the ceremony progressed, suddenly the energy of Lori Ann, my deceased sister, came through, and we spent hours together. And it was so beautiful to just intertwine with her energy and to feel the love and compassion, to feel my heart open with grief and sorrow and love and bliss at the same time. And what I realized afterwards is that I actually ended up having a soul retrieval of recommuning with that 7-year-old part of me that had been forgotten, and also reconnecting with her.
So I'm going to just let you give us a little summation of what the impulse in your being that led you to wanting to contribute this,
Well, it's so beautiful that you asked earlier what we felt our medicine to be, because it's the first time I've heard it come through so clearly for me, which is communion with Source. And I love that this wording of our book is shamanism, personal quests for communion with nature and creation, because for me, that word communion is the essence of shamanism and of my experience with shamanism. And what really flows through my experiences, what has come to direct my life and ground my life and be the purpose of my life, this communion. And this is what has been unfolding and got accelerated. So 12 years ago, I found myself in a place of angst about the challenges going on our beloved Mother Earth and creation here, and did a sort of heartrending, spontaneous ceremony, offering myself as a mouthpiece in service to Mother Earth. And in that magical moment of that intention, a peregrine falcon landed nearby and interacted with me as if and being an emissary from Mother Earth, as if accepting my offer. And everything just moved from there into an unfolding of revelations. And I began to learn and experience that creation is being guided by, all of creation is being guided by a living, conscious, cosmic consciousness of oneness. And that most sweetly, I was shown that Mother Earth has a dream. And this dream began to be revealed to me through songs. And that was really astonishing for me, because I'm not a singer or a songwriter or a musician, but I had offered myself as a mouthpiece. And so these song transmissions began to come through, portraying this dream of Mother Earth for our new Earth future.
Tell us a little bit more about your journey.
I'll tell you what's interesting, and I'll say first off that I don't identify with the wounds, but we all come into this life, into this form, I believe, to heal some things and to bring some gifts forward. And quite often, some of the things we are meant to heal didn't even originate with us. And so there's this part in the blood that perhaps we agree on. So bottom line, I came from a very dysfunctional family, and my father I never knew. And there was a promise that I would never know him, because he was a heroin addict, and his death was that he was getting shot in the back robbing a liquor store. And so I understand why my grandmother, the real grounding that I had in my life, why I never did know him. As it comes to be, though, he is an amazing ally in the spirit realm. And what I found at a very early age is that I needed to seek refuge from myself, and it came in very intangible ways. I found refuge in nature. I found refuge in the solitude, with the trees, with the wind, with the rain, with my own company. And what I've learned more than anything is that there are signs that are always speaking to us from this animated world. And if we should become curious, there's an entire language that's beyond the human design for us to integrate into our path, that helps us become, that helps us blossom, that brings us into the reasons we're here, beyond what we inherited to be healed.
Tell us about your story, Bonnie. What a journey.
Thank you, Don Oscar. I'm so honored to be part of this group. And oh gosh, this particular journey was part of probably since the early 1990s, I started consciously following the shamanic path. My parents were alcoholics. I had a difficult birth. My dad had PTSD from World War II and medicated it with alcohol, and then my mother joined him. So I didn't feel parented, except that the animals healed me and nature healed me. And so when I would get really, really sad, I would go climb a tree and sit in that tree for a long time, and then I would feel better. So when I started realizing, I do healing work myself, and I I think I was concentrating so much on working on everybody else, I didn't realize how much healing I needed. And when I started realizing that, because of having difficulty in some relationships, I did therapy, psychotherapy out in California for about 10 years. And it got to my head, but that was as far as it went. I started understanding what had happened, but I started also feeling like, am I just so wounded that I can't be fixed because I was something that wasn't getting deep enough? And that was when I started the shamanic path, and I started studying with different shamans and going, to different parts of the world. And one of the major places that I loved so much, I loved all of them, but Ecuador, the jungle and the Andes of Ecuador. And so this was one of the stories of two of my trips actually to Ecuador. I went 4 times. And so it was with the Shuar, and I saw them every time. They touched my heart, and that was when I realized, that was the part that had not healed.
Tell us about your life.
Well, nature has been a big part of my life and my journey. Like some others have mentioned, I started my hero's journey at a young age. People around me were not really available to be parents or guides or helpers, but I was always just so comfortable in nature as a little girl. And that blessing just followed me throughout my life. There was just a lot of wounding and a lot of pain, and nature was my one respite where I felt safe and loved. And around age 30, I began to really dive into my personal healing journey. And after not very long, it led me to the shamanic path. And during that time, I also happened to begin working with the Peruvian lineages and elders. And I was about halfway through a particular program when this opportunity, one of several that I had accepted, an opportunity to journey into a wilderness retreat environment. And with a small band of a group called themselves, we were a group of shamanic ensemble. And we would go into the wilderness and around sacred fire at night with our drumming and flutes and vocal, and just really be one with nature and allow whatever was to happen to come through us. So the story that I shared was of my time in Alaska, which was really so incredible, just because it's so pristine there. We were there in the fall, salmon run. So it was just so alive with the eagles and all the critters that were there and the bear that were there to eat the salmon, just to be in that pristine energy. So we were airboated up a river a couple of miles and dropped off with our camping gear and our instruments, and the fellow drove up. I'm sure he thought we were nuts. We had bear spray, but I'm sure I wouldn't have known how to use it if we needed to. So the week was incredible.
I did not go seeking the path that I walk, because it's actually a very difficult path. I don't think a lot of people realize that. So the story that I wrote, The House of the Dancing Spirits, it was culminated from not just one day, but a lot of the apprenticeship experiences that I've had. A lot of people don't realize that in order to really be an effective healer with Madre, you have to know the jungle, you have to know the spirits, you have to connect with the plants. So I've spent years living in the jungles with my teachers in very difficult, challenging, and absolutely amazing experiences in order to be able to open up, to be a conduit for these divine doctorcitos. So I wrote about a lot of the phenomenon maybe that I experience because it's magic. When you are willing to go way outside of your comfort zone, we like to say that the spirits take pity on us and they give us gifts. And I have found that.
I got sick in 2005 unexpectedly. and spent 7 years in a bedroom and was diagnosed with a primary immune disease that had about 1% chance of healing. And I was made totally and permanently disabled, and couldn't walk, couldn't read, couldn't write, lost, as we do with illness, our marriages, our careers, our families, our communities. And my gift throughout my life was that I could dream, and I had always connection and mystical experiences with the divine. So that kicked in 2012, and I studied counseling and did a lot of mental and emotional healing. But like the hero's journey, I had to undergo the final transformation, which is the spiritual. And we think that we're already spiritual, but of course, the spirits have other ideas, and our higher self has another story that we don't know. And so it was in 2017 that I began this final part of my journey, going to Peru for 2 months, and then going to America and doing dream training, and then the week with Hank in Brighton Bush with learning spirit medicine. And so for me, this was, again, connecting with nature that I had resisted as a child, but again, it became totally transformative for me, because the beauty of Brighton Bush and the way that the shamanic group that I was with and Hank pulled everything together with the trees and the dreaming of Brighton Bush and the river and the mountains and the ancient indigenous Indians that we could hear in the yurt. And so at the end of the week, Hank said that he would do a shamanic healing ceremony, and he selected me to be the recipient of that ceremony. And so my story is about the experience of that ceremony.
My story is about 3 events that happened over quite a few years. It was probably 10 years altogether, but there were 3 specific trips to the beach, to a wild beach where I built medicine wheel circles, and I brought my drum and I sang. So I got into that kind of altered state, and it felt like I was connected with the ancestors in that particular place. So all 3 circles were on the same beach over that time. And so the first time I was offering all this strange art. I was making different kinds of rattles and all kinds of strange creations. And I thought, what do I do with these? And each one had embodied a lot of energy in my life at the time. It felt like they were transforming little bits of myself. So I decided I was going to have a ceremony and offer all of my tools to the service of spirit, and having no idea what that even meant, but that was what I did. And so the morning following the ceremony is when I went back to visit my circle, and there was a magic bone on the beach. And I'm a beachcomber, so I know something when I see it. And this is something I'd never seen before. And so this happened 3 times. So the second time I went because and built a circle because I was in a really deep state of grief, and I couldn't shake it. There was just no way to shake it. So I made another circle, and I drummed and sang and got into that state again, and it just moved out. And then the third time was I was already camping there, and I got word that my dad's best friend had passed away. He had died of despair. So he had committed his own death, and I offered a ceremony for him just spontaneously. And so every time, I'm going to show you the bones. So I collect stones, especially with holes in them or faces on them, or I just love that sort of magical thing in nature. And so the universe, of course, responded with these bones, and each time I found 3 bones, and I'm going to show you one of them. So here's the bone. Speaking of hollow bone, it's like and you can see there it's a petrified bone, like, so it's yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So yeah, I was thinking how to start because it's so much. What I was saying is that it happened last year, and I think I was on a quest, doing all the shifts and changes which are happening still in this world and happened in the last 2 or 3 years. I really asked myself, who am I? And I really let myself be guided by my soul and really followed that calling. And I traveled to many places, sometimes by my soul, and sometimes I think and believe by spirit, to let's say reconnect with ancient sacred sites, with power places in nature, and to really understand who am I, or who are we, where do we belong, where do we come from. Also this kind of connection to ancient souls, to ancient wisdom, to star beings, to priestesses, to medicine women, to this amazing vast universe, which is a mystery. Deep feeling of disbalance in the whole land, and especially in the culture and the treatment of the women, because I never saw women on the streets, mostly in burqas. So and it's a very ancient oracle temple, and they say that like one of the black doves from the Pleiades came there, became a priestess of that oracle temple, and I'm really connected to the Pleiades, and I felt it was feeling that it was gone like dust, like all this wisdom and connection to the feminine, divine feminine, and the wisdom and the honoring and the not worshipping, but more like bringing love and understanding that we can learn from each other.
Carry the beauty of our hoop into all your next incarnations.